lady I saw you with this afternoon.
That was no lady. That was my wife.
Gentlemen, Mr. Ned Haverland.
I want you to know that I'm a ragged but right. Oh, black.
Baby, I hope.
Well, let's see now. I'll pay you all your worth.
No, ma'am, I gotta have some money.
Before televisions, computers, and phones were as accessible as they are today, some popular forms of entertainment were movies and comedy shows. In some shows, people would put blackface on and mock African Americans using exaggerated stereotypes rather than depicting real, ordinary black people. These were called minstrel shows. It's hard to put a finger on when minstrel shows in blackface originally started, because servant characters with blackface were on U.S. stages since the 18th century, but the beginning of its most famous era can be traced back to 1828, when Thomas Rice made the character of Jim Crow. They rose to popularity soon after, and peaked around the 1840s through the 1870s, after the Civil War in the Reconstruction era. Now that all the enslaved people were free, the racist white people wanted to find a new way to degrade African Americans. And since entertainment was a popular form of communication at the time, it was also a great way to spread misinformation. Minstrel shows did not allow black people to be seen as human. People would darken their skin using black paint, shoe polish, burnt cork, or grease paint, with lips that were often too enlarged. The minstrel performers would depict African Americans as buffoons, criminals, lazy, and etc. Each of their moves would be over-exaggerated and overemphasized. As Deanne Root said, they were trying to exaggerate and make something exotic. Once it began in the Northeast, it spread rapidly throughout all of America. The racist white people used these minstrel shows as justifications for slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow laws, and also an open window for white supremacy. In fact, the Jim Crow laws were named after Thomas Rice, or Daddy Rice's character Jim Crow. The Jim Crow laws were state and local laws that were enforced to legalize segregation against colored people. African Americans would be required to have separate schools, libraries, transportation services, restrooms, even water fountains, and the list doesn't even stop there. During his performances, Rice would portray a slow-witted, foolish black man. Though the connection between the Jim Crow laws and the character Jim Crow is not clear, you can clearly notice the true purpose and motive of the laws because of the symbolization of the name they were given. As Manthia Diawara, an art historian and writer, said, "The blackface stereotype too, by deforming the body, silences it and leaves room only for white supremacy to speak through it." The symbolization that was created when the actors put on blackface and performed on the stage created a false image which stayed in everyone's mind. Especially in communities where African Americans were not common, people started believing these depictions were the truth, and false stereotypes started spreading. Minstrel shows became so popular and widely known around America that there were some theaters made just for minstrel shows. They were used as foundations for future entertainment and comedy shows. The viewers and performers consisted of mostly white people, and even though some minstrel shows had African American performers, the industry was largely controlled by white men. While on stage, minstrel performers were able to communicate an idea indirectly to the audience. An idea and visualization where they categorized black people into a certain set, reducing the individuality and identity of black people by giving them just one definition. And because these ideas were mostly transferred from one to another visually, they retained in people's memory more often. False depictions of the lives of African Americans started becoming true depictions in the minds of some people. In some minstrel shows, black people were shown as criminals or savage. Racial violence would be justified asserting these stereotypes. By the start of the 20th century, vaudeville movies and the radio started rising in popularity, so minstrel shows had more competition, but they were still common. They were finally forced to end during the civil rights movement due to protests against them, and though blackface was still found throughout the rest of the 1900s, there were no more minstrel shows. The sad thing is that if you look at the times that we are living in right now, you can see how these stereotypes are still impacting millions of African Americans daily. Innocent people can be called criminals, dangerous, can be undervalued, and sadly even killed just because of the color of their skin. This is not stating that all racial problems in today's world, racial discrimination and racial prejudice, are directly originated from minstrel shows, but the impact of minstrel performers putting on blackface and earning money for disparaging black people cannot be overlooked. What we can do is learn how to use entertainment shows to communicate the similarities of everyone as humans, instead of concentrating and exaggerating on the differences. Thank you for listening.